Chris Smith discovered his path early in life. He began his musical journey by sharing his love of music with young people and playing brass instruments for over 25 years. He continues his journey by repairing damaged instruments. Chris Smith is next on OTP.
Hey, welcome, Chris. How you doing?
I am doing well. How are you?
We're doing great. I want to thank you for coming on to the podium. And after a long day,
Yeah, every
we're
day's a long day.
we're filming this now at 6:30 in the evening, and you've been out working on instruments.
Yes, sir.
We appreciate it. So let's get right into it. Let's see. Uh, you were born in Albuquerque, correct, and
Yes,
raised in?
I am a rare native plant. I was born and raised here.
All right. Now, did your parents and your siblings play music at all? And how was music in your family?
Well, I understand that my grandfather played trumpet, but we have no evidence of that. His horn and he is long past. But my dad played baritone in middle school and high school, and I actually still have his horn. It was the horn I started on when I was in fourth grade.
Cool.
And my mom has always been into music. She played flute and piano and organ and things for churches and things like that. And when I was young, she insisted that we take piano lessons, which I was really not fond of. And when I got into fourth grade here in APS, at that time, you could start beginning band in elementary school. And I jumped into beginning band, really, really wanted to play drums.
Who didn't?
Everybody wanted to play drums. My band director at the time said, you're a little short, you're a little small, maybe you shouldn't, you're going to be walking to school, because my mom was a teacher actually at the school. And she said, well, let us figure it out. But we won't do drums because it's going to be too heavy and too big. And
too loud.
Yeah. And my grandmother said, oh, we've still got your dad's baritone in the shed out back. And she had this bunker for a shed in the backyard. So it was totally protected from weather and stuff. It was just kind of hot in there. Right. And we dragged out the old baritone and took it over to one of the music stores and had it cleaned up. And I started on baritone. And then in seventh grade, a good buddy of mine convinced me that I needed to sit next to him. He played bari sax and I played baritone, and I thought it would be more fun to sit next to him. So I volunteered to switch to tuba.
Okay.
And when that happened, my band director took me and basically handed me a sousaphone and said, if you'll come in at lunchtime and practice, you can just practice until you're ready to join the band. And I went in and sat down. I don't know if you remember those old Wenger chairs that had the sousaphone, like you'd sit in the chair. And
absolutely
stay there. So I crawled up into the sousaphone, and I sat down and took a big breath and, made the first big note I could make, and immediately was like, I have to do this from now on. This is amazing. And here I am still playing tuba. So,
well, that led into my next question about the sound of the instrument, the force of what was it of the instrument that just got inside you and pushed you to go on?
It's weird. Even as a kid, I enjoyed music with like lots of bass lines and stuff. So when I was growing up, I enjoyed listening to band music, like regular concert band music. But I often would ask my parents if I could turn on the radio and listen to things like funk and disco and things like that, because that's how old I am. That stuff was on the radio at the time. And I really enjoyed just the bass lines and stuff like that in music. And, when I sat in that practice room and played that note, a sousaphone in one of those APS practice rooms,
right,
the whole room just shook. And I was like, yes,
the power,
more power. And that was it. I was hooked. And I've been playing it ever since. And was lucky enough to get to take some private lessons also, very shortly thereafter. And the person who was teaching me is Byron Harrington.
Oh, yeah.
Private teacher when I was in 6th and 7th grade. And he had that same kind of, just play louder, play with more power, and that's, and
Give it all you got.
yeah, it was great. I think
Yeah.
it was just his way of getting me to blow, put
Yeah,
more air into
yeah.
the horn. But
Right.
yeah.
Now for our audience members, we're here in Albuquerque, and this is Albuquerque Public Schools, APS, that we're referring to. And so, you brought back a memory of my freshman year at Grambling. So I go into Grambling and go through band camp, August, the heat of Louisiana, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And it's our first as a freshman rehearsal. 300 kids in this band room, had to be at least 18 plus sousaphones
Yeah.
behind. I was playing drums at the time, or trying to. And when they came out and played boom, 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 and I was like, oh my God, where am I?
Yep.
Yeah. So I can identify with that. And, you talk about that bass line. I'm a firm believer. Talk a little bit about, you have to have the drums and that bass to have a good band.
Yeah, I've heard people say that the tuba is the most important instrument, and I'm not entirely convinced that it's always the most important. But when it comes to your harmonic structure, and it comes to keeping time and just making things groove, it is incredibly important to have a bass player that can stay with that beat and keep it going. And I enjoy doing that. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah. There's really nothing as much so frustrating to be playing and having a drummer or a bass just not keeping the
Oh God,
time.
it's hard.
to,
Yeah, so many times. And I don't play. I love playing tuba. It is my main instrument, but I do play other brass instruments.
Right.
And I play in a couple of groups where I play euphonium and I play trombone and I play some other things here and there. And every once in a while, you come across somebody who's been asked to play whatever bass parts.
Right.
And sometimes it's really hard.
Yeah, lining it up.
To line everything up and stay, and everybody says, listen to the bass, listen down, listen. It doesn't work if down is not there.
Yeah. There's a hole.
Yeah. It's hard. So
what type of you sort of referred to this? What type of music were you listening to at the early ages?
Oh God. Because of my parents, I listened to all kinds of stuff.
Cool.
My dad loved classical music.
Cool.
Just loved it. And my mom enjoyed classical, but frequently, she being a teacher, my dad was a plumber. And we'd be listening in the car a lot.
Yeah.
And so we'd be driving places and whatever was on the radio. And so, like I said, you'd hear disco tunes and you'd hear pop tunes of from that time period. And some of the radio stations around here played tunes from musicals and things like that occasionally. And it's just my listening taste is hugely varied. And I think that started at a very young age because we would listen to all kinds of stuff all the time. I liked old country stuff, and I really, really liked bluegrass. And like I said, I thoroughly enjoy, Earth, Wind and Fire and Tower of Power and other funk bands. And there's a few other, and I always listening to classical music and band music. And I've had an opportunity to collaborate when I was teaching with a guy up in Chicago who does like Baltic and Eastern European music, and played and listened to a lot of that kind of stuff, and all kinds of world music. And I frequently find myself just going on to YouTube or Spotify and typing in some country that I've never been to and look for
Right.
music that comes from there and listen to it for a while just to see if it's interesting.
Right.
And then, that stuff comes back up in your feed.
Yeah.
And if you like it, you keep listening to it. And I, oftentimes as I'm going through my YouTube and I'll just tell it to play what's next,
Right.
whatever's next is just the weirdest stuff. Sometimes it's electronic, sometimes it's,
Yeah.
synthesized stuff. Sometimes it's, Seiji Ozawa playing, with the Tokyo Kasai band. Sometimes there's just this huge pile of music. I play in a polka band and love that stuff. I will listen to anything at least once, and then if I like it, it's going to keep coming back.
Right. Yeah.
So
Polka is some hard music to play, man.
Oh, it's a blast. I love it.
Yeah.
It's a kick.
Yeah, that's great. So okay, let me see. I want to get you back to you're in middle school, you're heading to high school. What high school did you go to?
Rio Grande
High School.
Rio Grande High School here.
Give a shout out to your director. Who was your director?
That was John Nelson.
Ah, I remember him.
Yeah. In fact, that's how I met you.
Yeah.
I was a freshman in high school at Rio Grande High School, and he was a new band director in Albuquerque at the time.
That's right.
And he had asked you to come to band camp and help us with marching and drill stuff. And we were over at Milne Stadium, and you were there helping him teach us how to do the 8 to 5 and all the things.
Yeah.
And,
boy,
and that was the first time I met you.
Yeah, that's right. Those were good days, man. I remember that. I've forgotten his name though. Yeah, that's right. Now, at that point, were you sort of feeling your idea and your thoughts that I think I might want to do this for a living or go into college, or you just like every other kid like me, just not knowing what the word?
I had no intention of going into music professionally. I knew that my mom was a teacher, and I knew that things were a little hard.
Right.
My dad was a plumber. He made quite a bit of money working and doing stuff like that. Right. But that work was just backbreaking. I mean, he physically just got beat up.
Yeah.
He loved doing it, but it was rough. Yeah. And then I just really took to like science and math. And so I went into college fully intending to major in physics. And I remember having the conversation with my parents about, I think I want to go to Caltech or I want to go to Stanford or someplace that has a really good physics department. And
wow. I
applied to those places and got accepted, but no scholarships. Right. And I thought, if I could get into the band or something like that, that would be great. I could probably get a scholarship doing that. And those places just don't do those kinds of scholarships. That's just not, it's available.
Yeah.
And so I also applied here at UNM and tried out for the band and wound up getting a presidential scholarship through a teacher at my school who helped me do all of that, and tried out for the audition process for the marching band and the concert band and all that at UNM, and wound up getting multiple music scholarships.
There you go.
And so I figured, well, I'll just stay here and I'll start doing physics because they have a good physics department. And of course, to keep your scholarship, you have to be in those groups.
Yeah.
And so after 2 years I was in a brass quintet, I was in the concert band, I was in the symphonic band, I was in the marching band, I did pep band at the pit, and then also wound up trying out for the symphony orchestra and got into the symphony orchestra.
Wow.
And so I was doing all of that and then trying to keep up with my physics work and stuff, which is all the labs and all the math and everything else. And after 2 years, I realized that I was having an awful lot of fun doing the music stuff.
Right.
And so I started looking at music majors and thought, the music teaching thing would be a stable way to go. I don't know about performing. I'm probably not a good enough performer to pull that off, but teaching I could learn to do well. And I had the idea from the physics stuff about how classroom things should work and stuff like that. So I thought
Mhm.
I'll start there. And so of course I'm 2 years behind and had to start all over with a new major, and none of the classes lined up with the semesters I was on and everything. So I wound up being, I was like a 6.5 year
A career student.
degree. Yeah, but it was fun. In that process, I wound up getting to be drum major for UNM, and
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, I was the drum major for the marching band, and
All right.
did that stuff, and yeah, so it was a kick, and and here we are,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
these years later, and still doing that. So
Talk a little bit about that transition that went through your mind in college. You know, I would suppose we had it here in our own family. I never did make a change. I made a change with instruments in college, but not a major. When you were playing all this in your mind, was it difficult to make that true jump to music? Because I mean, physics, you're gonna make a little bit of money when you
you
come out of
could,
there.
yeah. So what sealed the deal for me,
Yeah.
it was like, oh my God, I've been putting all this work in. I mean, I've been doing this since I was in middle school and high school, really thinking about doing physics. I wanted to be a physicist somehow, and right at the time that I got into college is when the internet really hit. And that was really interesting. And as I started doing
Mm,
classes where they were requiring us to do modeling,
okay.
computer programming, and this kind of stuff, I realized that my ADD was going to keep me from wanting to sit at a computer all
Okay.
every day to do my job.
Right.
Before that, physicists were people who went out and built big machines and
Right.
did field work and really did experiments, and they did all their math on chalkboards, and
Yeah.
you see Einstein with
Right.
stacks of chalkboards everywhere, and that was all going onto a computer,
Right. Right.
and sitting at a desk all day long and not being able to do anything except sit there, and you can get up, you can go walk around, but your work has to be done on that machine,
Right.
really sealed it for me that I didn't want to be doing that all day every day. I just
Right.
couldn't make myself sit still long enough to want to do that.
Okay.
And in the music stuff, especially the teaching portion of it, you get to roam around the room, you get
Yeah.
shuck and jive with the kids. You get to have
Right.
to, pick up whatever instrument you want to play today and play it with the
Right.
kids for,
Yeah.
help them with modeling and doing the things. And I was just like, yeah,
That's you. That's
it
you.
might, just the whole spastic personality thing is it's going to fit better with roaming a classroom. And I mean, I could have taught physics
Right.
and taught science. And I've actually had some collaborations with some science teachers at the schools I worked at, where they would ask me to come in and teach like their acoustics classes
Right.
and stuff
Right.
like that.
Right.
And that was a lot of fun, but
Sure.
I don't know that, because
Yeah.
even they do stuff on, their whole classroom is computer based. And even
Right.
back then it was getting that way more
Yeah.
and more for science. And I was just not that into doing everything on a computer. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I love it. I love it because I mean, all of us that have been playing, most of us coming from chorus, orchestra, band, what have you, it's that physicality, it's that movement, and music is in us. And you just don't sit there and just, straight and narrow right down. You've got to feel it. And you realize that as you're making your decisions in college. I love it. That's great. So now you're at UNM, and you said it took you a little bit longer. Did that play into your mind that, wow, you know, did it discourage you at all, or you were just
I was
full
concerned
steam?
that, the scholarships typically are a 4-year thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if you go beyond your 4 years, how do you pay for that?
yeah.
And it just so happened that one of the favorite hangouts in the basement at UNM was in front of the band office door. Everybody would just sit on the floor in that hallway and hang out. And
Right.
there was a door next to the band office that was the Keller Hall office.
Okay.
And Ralph Harris was
Tell
the Keller Hall manager. And him and I got to talking and doing stuff, and actually, the Civil War band stuff that I've been doing for a long time.
Right.
He started all of that up, and kind of how I stumbled into that and paying for college at the same time was he basically offered me a job working at the Keller Hall office if I would play in the Civil War band. And,
bribery.
Well, and he scheduled, it was really funny. I'm sure this was not above board, but it was, nobody cared.
Yeah.
He offered me a job and scheduled me specifically to work Keller Hall, which is you go up and you turn on the lights and get people set up, and they rehearse their recitals.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessary for their practice.
Right.
I open the doors, I turn on the lights, I set up the shelves and chairs and stands and things they need. And then I sit around and wait for them to call me and to tell me they're done so I can lock up.
Right.
So Ralph would schedule me the nights that we were rehearsing.
Okay.
And so basically I got paid to show up and practice in the Civil War band.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
he'd stay around. We'd do everybody else in the band would show up. We'd play. I'd run out, set up the hall.
Right.
We'd rehearse. I'd run up every once in a while between tunes to check on folks and make sure they had everything they needed and do what they needed to do. And then we'd lock down and head out. And it was a work study job. And that's how I paid for the remainder of college, was doing the work study stuff through Keller Hall and Popejoy.
Great. Yeah, we make it work. That's for sure.
You just figure it out.
Yeah. I love it. So now you're graduating from UNM, and are you thinking to stay in Albuquerque, or are you thinking about moving out?
I was offered a job in the Round Mountain School District, which is kind of directly south and west of Socorro, over in Arizona. And it's a little tiny school district. They had a job that was teach middle school, high school band, middle school, high school orchestra, and run the Performing Arts Center for the town, which was associated with the high school.
Wow.
And it was a very, very busy job. I went down there to check out the job and interview, and it was really creepy. Because somebody recommended that I go, when I get there, leave early, drive down, and go into the grocery store and just look at the prices of things.
Okay.
To see if you can afford to live there on what they're going to pay you. What do groceries cost? What are see what the price of housing is. Go by one of the apartment complexes and see what the rent is and stuff like this. So do some research and see if you can actually afford to live off the paycheck the school's going to give you. Okay. Right. So I drove down and I walked into the McDonald's. And
you said locked?
I walked into the McDonald's.
Okay, got it.
And this lady walks up to me and says, "You're not from here, are you?" Because it's this small a town. And no, ma'am, I'm not. And she says, "Did I see you pull up in a New Mexico license plate on your car?" I said, "Yes." "You're the new band director." And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. This town is so small that everybody knows everything.
They know the license plate.
So sure enough, the word had gotten around that they were interviewing this new band director potentially, and he was coming from New Mexico and was supposed to interview on whatever day it was. And then there I was, and everybody knew who I was, and it was kind of scary and kind of freaked me out. It would have been an interesting job. The Round Mountain School District has their own dome for their football team. They have an indoor stadium because they get enough snow that they have to have an indoor field for their football team. And it was built by I want to say it was built by the Cardinals or somebody as their practice field for the school district. So during the summertime, when there's no school, the professional team comes over and practices at a higher altitude in their stadium. And the rest of the year, it belongs to the schools. And so the marching band would have had indoor
Right.
football stadium to play in and practice in and all the stuff. And I was like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But I couldn't, in my mind,
You couldn't.
handle the tiny town mentality.
Sure.
And
Sure.
and so I came back and thought, well, no, I
Yeah.
probably won't take that job. And
Yeah.
then I was working for Keller Hall still,
Right.
helping out at Allstate at UNM. And Ron Sanders comes to me and says, hey, I hear you've graduated. We are looking for a band director in Los Lunas. Would you be interested in applying for the job? You need to talk to Henry Estrada. So he walked me over to Henry. I talked to Henry. Henry set up an interview within a day or two. And I headed down to Los Lunas and applied for the new band director job that was down there, being, the assistant to everybody everywhere.
Yeah.
0 hour at the high school, go to
Right.
the middle school, help
Right.
out, go to the new middle school, help out, go back to one of the other schools and teach beginning band. And,
Right.
so I was teaching at 5 different schools a day, everything from kindergarten to high school music and
Right.
band. And went ahead and took that job, and I worked there for 3 years.
Great. Good teaching
And
there, huh?
yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
marching band was a decent size, and we had a good time with them, and put
Right.
together a second jazz band at the high school, and
Cool.
did that. And
Yeah.
fun working with Henry and Ron. And
Right. Right. Yeah. That's those kind of experiences on the job training. It's you can't get rid. You can't do without it because
right.
it builds what you're going to be in the band room later on.
Well, and it's funny. I hope I've done this for the folks that I've been in contact with over the years, but being able to be at the schools with those two guys
Right.
who are willing to, take a chance with this new kid,
Right.
but also be willing to help out.
Sure.
You got to know what you're doing.
Right.
But if you have a question about anything,
Yeah.
they were totally willing to stop what they were doing and help you out.
Yeah. There you go.
And it just makes all the difference in the world.
When you come across people like that, I had a similar experience. Bruce Dalby, we all know the great Ron Lipka.
Oh yeah.
God bless them. And I honestly say, Albuquerque's full of all these kind of directors, including yourself, that you call people up and you say, hey, I'm having trouble with. I remember calling Ken Erickson, one of the band directors up.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, my French horn players, give me help with this, and he gave me some tips, So we've been very blessed here in Albuquerque and in New Mexico with, Pancho Romero,
Oh God. Yeah. Yep.
just willing to help you any kind of way and reach out to you and come over, so that's great. You also play, let's get into some of the ensembles that you've been playing. Talk about your experience there with the brass quintets and groups you've been
Oh
playing.
yeah. Well, so it kind of started, Byron Harrington kind of threw me in into the deep end. I was taking lessons one summer, and he says, hey, you know what? Nobody has auditioned for tuba in the Albuquerque Youth Symphony. You need to go do that. Give me a second. He disappeared for a minute. He comes back and says, your mom is sitting out there. She's going to take you over to Mr. Kempter's office, and you're going to audition for him right now.
You don't have a choice in the matter.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So we canceled my lesson, and my mom drove me over to the music offices for APS.
Right.
And this was like it was in the summertime, but it was like a Wednesday or Thursday afternoon.
Right.
And we drive over there, and I'm schlepping this tuba into the office building, and go find Mr. Kempter. And I sat down, and he had me play some things and told me, yeah, you should come join us. That would be great. And I, honest to God, don't know how my parents afforded that. I know they have scholarships and stuff, and I have no idea. I was never told if I received that or not, but I'm pretty sure my parents could not afford to be paying for all the things that my brother and I were always involved with. So when that came up, it was something happened because I was able to do it. And I went up to the summer camp up at Hummingbird with the youth symphony and started playing tuba in the Albuquerque Youth Symphony. And that was my first, big ensemble other than just school.
Right. Yeah.
And then when I got into college, Jeff Piper was offering classes, like individualized, like group classes, as part of his studio. Yeah. And so two of the trumpet players wanted to do a brass quintet thing. So we put together a brass quintet there. And that brass quintet actually did a bunch of fun stuff. We played quite a bit at school, but we got a lot of gigs while we were playing.
Right.
And actually, we got to play up in Los Alamos. One year, we were asked by the Los Alamos Chamber of Commerce to open for the Empire Brass. They were coming to do a concert, and they just had a local group play beforehand for people coming in and stuff. Wow. And we got to be that group. And when the Empire Brass found out that there was a student group playing before them at this performance, they asked us if we wanted a master class.
Cool.
And we were like, yeah, sure, but how much does it cost? And they said, oh, don't worry about it. We're going to be playing there anyway. Let's just do it. So before we went out on stage and played, they did an hour with us back in the green room working through the tunes that we played for the performance.
Right.
And that was a riot. And after the concert, they invited us to Tanglewood.
Oh, wow.
For the Empire Brass clinic that they do up there. Like, you guys really should come. We'd love to have you. We have scholarships and things like that. Here's the paperwork. Give us a call, call the office here. So we did some fundraising and did some gigs and raised some money. And that next summer we went up to Tanglewood and did the Empire Brass clinic.
That's great.
And that was awesome.
Right.
And that was a complete riot. We spent like 3 weeks up there, and every major orchestra comes through and does a concert at the Shell at the Tanglewood Center there. And every time those groups come in, they give lessons to whoever the kids are that are at the camp.
Right.
And so, 5 or 6 different major orchestras come through, and I got to take lessons 2-3 times each week with all those guys. It was ridiculous.
See, now you take me into my next question about talk to our audience about the importance of private lessons. That's just something that needs to be talked about more.
So when I was teaching, I had a thing I used to pass out at Christmas time.
Yeah,
it was a little flyer, and it was titled Young Musicians Christmas Wish List. And I would hand it out with the programs at our winter concert.
Right.
And it would say, number 1, private lessons, new reeds,
right,
new reed protector, private lessons, a new mouthpiece, private lessons, a whole new instrument, private lessons, professional cleaning of your instrument, private lessons. And and I just tried to drive home. It's weird, but the school situation, so many kids, I used to get the idea that the kids that didn't enjoy performing in the school band only stuck around because their friends were there.
Right.
They didn't really feel like they were good at it.
Right. Yeah.
And in a mass group setting, and sometimes, as you know, your class can be 30, 40, 50, 60 kids.
Right.
It is nearly impossible to give them the individualized, differentiated instruction that they really deserve.
Right.
You can do a section, and you might clue in on the one kid who's got a problem, and give them that face about, get your chin flat, or, whatever it is, just to remind them about things. But some of those kids are not accessing the information you're giving them because it hasn't been sent to them in a way they understand it yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And private lessons, that individual teacher, even if it's only 20, 30 minutes,
right,
can sit there with an individual child
Right.
and assess every little detail of all of the habits, all of the problems, all of the things,
Yeah.
and can give them
Yeah.
in rapid succession 15 or 20 different ways to
Right.
try to understand whatever problem they're having,
Yeah.
and then put it in practice right then.
Personalized.
Yeah,
Right for you.
100% personalized.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I know private teachers who say that this kid never practices,
Yeah.
but when they're in the room with them, they are practicing,
Right.
and that is 30 more minutes or an hour more than they practiced last week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that translates back into their classroom automatically. So it's just, it really does give that kid an opportunity to access something, and especially if they want to be good at it. I don't know a kid who doesn't want to be good at something they're looking at.
That's right.
They try hard for a reason, and we all fail at things, but when they really feel like a failure, they quit.
Yeah.
And if you can just help them push past that
Right.
not working thing, and sometimes it just takes, I'm sure you did it.
Yeah.
You're in the room at lunchtime and that kid comes in and you work with that one kid every day for a week or two, and they finally get it when they're by themselves.
And when that kid goes, "Hey, I got that lick."
Yeah. I hit that note, or I got that lick, or oh, now I understand how come I'm out of tune there. Okay. That light bulb comes on. But that's the problem. It's like there's 50 light switches and they have to be in a specific combination for that light bulb to come on for that kid.
Right. Exactly.
And it takes time to flip the switches into all the possible permutations to find the light bulb moment.
It's like physics.
Well, it is. It's just that's how our brains work. People don't just learn everything the same way. Everybody's got something they need to make it click. And, it's our job to try and figure it out. But sometimes we just never get there with some kids. And
it's an ongoing process. That's for sure. On any subject matter that you're teaching, you're trying to reach that kid, and you just got to keep pushing through. Now, at the same time, correct me if I'm wrong, you got into the Army band, or
that was after it was about the time I had been teaching in APS. I had left Los Lunas and came back to APS, and it was one of those things, I've been around forever, and so everybody knows me and can call me to fill in for things. And Wendy Franchell was the band commander at the time for the 44th Army Band here in Albuquerque. And she called me up and asked me if I could fill in because there was going to be a performance they were having, and none of their tuba players were going to be able to make it to drill that weekend for some reason or another.
Right.
A couple of them may have been deployed for something because they are in the Army, and they could have been, shipped off someplace with their unit other than the band. So I told her, sure, what do I need to do? She told me when their next drill weekend was, and they put me in a uniform and gave me the music, and I ran through a rehearsal and did a couple performances with them. And she was just like, you would be really great in the band. Why don't you sign up? And I was like, well, what would that take? You got to go through basic training and all the stuff. And I was at that time, I was 35, 36 years old.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I know where you're going.
How old will they take you? And it took about another year or so. So by the time I made it into basic, I was like 38.
Wow.
And at the time, it was my understanding, one of the drill sergeants in basic told me that I was at that time the oldest person to ever be accepted into basic training.
Wait. Let me stop you there. Because, my son, you probably know Jerry.
Yeah.
In the Navy. So you're 35 plus in there and you're in basic. What in the world was going through your head?
Honestly, I thought, first of all, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to survive it. And then when I realized I could survive it, I realized that everybody around me was like 12, you know, um, and
Hey, Grandpa.
yeah, exactly. The drill sergeants who were my age were making fun of me for being such a dingbat, you know. Um, but you have a whole different perspective on things when you're that age.
Sure.
And
Sure.
there were some funny things that happened during basic that kind of threw a monkey wrench into some of their
Yeah.
things. There was an episode where we were practicing map reading, and they pulled out, it's just topographic maps, and they're expecting you to read the maps and find places. And the map was of the Hanford nuclear power plant in Hanford, Washington. And I was able to identify what the place was because my grandmother and grandfather were plumbers, and they helped put the plumbing in the Hanford nuclear power plant. They were on the WPA programs that went up there, and they were one of the companies that was hired to do plumbing in the power plant.
Right.
And so I recognized street names from stories my grandma and grandpa had told me, and I remembered the layout of the place, and I could see where the fields where they had the trailers lined up for people, and the drive-in movie theater a distance away. It was on the map, the whole thing. And I raised my hand. And I was like, "Hey, this is the Hanford nuclear power plant. What are we doing studying that?" And they literally picked up all the maps
Yeah.
and put them away and brought out new ones.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want anybody to know what was going on with the map you were looking at. You were just supposed to follow the orders.
Right.
And they had no idea that they had somebody old enough to know and recognize what that place was.
Right. Yeah.
And it was kind of funny.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They have obstacle courses where you get together in a small squad and you have to complete the obstacle course.
Yeah.
And some of the obstacles, you cannot finish them without losing somebody on your team.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And, you've got these groups of teenagers who are trying to save everybody.
Yeah.
And in my team, I would be the guy who would, if everybody else gets across here, I'm going to get left behind.
Right.
Because not everybody can make it. There's no way to get everybody across.
Yeah.
But you guys can haul more weight than I can. So leave me back here.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And the drill sergeants were very upset that one of the squads figured out that you couldn't finish all of the obstacle courses with everybody intact.
Right. Your reasoning there was not the norm.
Right. Which is, they're used to getting these kids in there who think they're unstoppable.
Yeah. Charge the hill.
You're right. And they were dealing with somebody who was not, who just was too old to think that way.
Yeah. And well, first of all, I thank you for your service there and the guts to. I'm going back in my mind 30 years, if I can remember that, and I don't even think I would have attempted. Someone would have said basic training, and I went, "I'm out."
Yeah,
forget about it. But
I'm not that smart.
Yeah, you took. You got the guts, and you said, "Okay, let me do that." And
and in the process, I laugh when people tell me, thank you for your service. I appreciate it, but I finished basic, but by the time I was done, I was injured to the point where they had to discharge me. So I got bad tendonitis in my wrists to the point where I had to have surgery.
Wow.
And they wouldn't let me continue.
On, yeah.
So I finished basic, but that was about as far as I got.
They couldn't use you.
Right.
So okay, so now you're continuing on, and you're in your job as a band director. What was your first school in Albuquerque public school system?
So I only taught at one school. I taught for 23 years at Monroe Middle School, the new Monroe.
God bless you.
Yeah.
When did that open up?
2001, 2000, right in there.
Yeah.
It was. I worked for 3 years in Los Lunas, and realized I was putting over 100 miles a day on my car.
Right.
driving to Los Lunas, around town and home every day.
Right. Yeah.
And so when a job opened up in Albuquerque, I applied for it and got hired and
Yeah.
went to work at Monroe and opened the school. The building wasn't complete.
Right.
And, I don't think people realize how insane band teachers are in general.
Right.
I took the job knowing that I wasn't going to have a room.
I think I remember that
I
actually.
was literally in a tent outside. They erected like a circus tent out on the quad in front of the school. And I had to do band out there. They put all of my chairs and stuff in a closet in the cafeteria. And we schlepped that stuff out every day. And there were no instruments. So I was doing general music basically to start with. And then as the year progressed, more and more of the building was finished because it was still being built. And they moved us into the cafeteria and they put up a fake wall so I could lock everything up because the instruments were coming in,
Right.
shipped in as we were going.
Right.
And by the third quarter of the school year, the band room was finally open.
I remember you talking about that. Yep.
And so it was, the last quarter of the school year, we finally got to use the band room and move everything into it.
And how many years did you do over there?
23.
23.
Yep.
You and I are holding hands. How did it feel just recently for you to retire from that school? You went through COVID.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know I didn't go through COVID. I was retired during that time, but I don't know. I still look at the band room door when we drove by it today, and I glance over at the back of the door there.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind when you left that building for the last time?
It was kind of crazy because I think I spent more hours in that room than I did at my house.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just how it feels. It's funny because you know where everything is. And I tried really hard to make sure that everything was in a place where whoever came in next could find it. It's weird because as a teacher, you talk about my school and my band room. And you even say to the kids, don't beat up my instruments.
That's right.
You really do take it personally.
You do.
And then you suddenly don't have that place to call yours anymore. But when I walked out, it was odd because I thought there was some sadness because I enjoyed the folks I worked with. That school has some of the greatest teachers in the world in my mind.
Yeah.
I love those people and a lot of them are still there. And I was at the school at that point. There were only 2 of us left who were there when the school opened.
Right.
And, I was there longer than the principal, the vice principal, the janitors, everybody.
Yeah.
And, all of those people were really great, but COVID really convinced me that it was time to go.
Yeah.
I was just at a point in my mind and in my own personal health that I was like, if I stay here any longer,
right.
it could be a problem for me.
It's not going to be pretty.
Yeah. I mean, everybody yells at kids once in a while when things go wrong, but I'm not prone to temper tantrums, but I could feel them coming up.
Yeah.
And I was just like, if I can stick it out those 2 last years,
right,
and get to my retirement,
right,
and do it in a way that leaves me feeling good about what I did and how I did it,
right,
I will win.
Yeah.
And nobody could have convinced me to stay any longer than I did.
Yeah. No, we're holding hands there. I knew that I stepped on the podium and I could feel literally in my body and mind and soul, my patience
Yeah.
wasn't what it used to be.
Yep.
And the kids deserved more. So it was time to leave, um, and do the profession justice. You know,
Right. Yeah. It was just, the I couldn't give the empathy to the kids
right,
that, and especially, again, going back to those individuals who really need a
right,
little extra work.
right,
I didn't have the energy to
yeah,
make that happen
yeah, yeah,
at that point. And those kids deserved way better than I could give them.
right,
And I knew I could put everything into it for a couple more years, but
yeah,
I wasn't going to make it any further than that because I just wasn't going to be willing to put up with
yeah,
what it is anymore.
yeah,
And it was just, it was just my personal
right.
limit. Um, you
It's
know,
a hard gig. It's a young man, young woman's gig, and you got to have that young blood sometimes.
well, I mean, there are some people who just go till the end, they love
It's
it
true.
and just keep
That's it.
going.
That's right.
But I'm just grateful that I realized that I was going to, that I could bow out gracefully rather
Right.
than be asked to leave,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
you
Right.
know?
Well, before I let you go, we always ask everyone that's on the podium to talk to our audience about why music is so important and why should we continue to play or listen or have music in our life. Tell us a little bit about that, Chris.
So, it's funny. I used to have these conversations with my kids on the podium. Um, I I really feel like for whatever reason, the human race has developed music to be part of our entire being. And I would explain to the kids that, your entire life has a soundtrack. And whether you're participating in the performance or whether you're consuming the music, just by listening, or if you're dancing or whatever it is, music is everywhere.
That's right.
You can't walk into a store, you can't walk into a gas station, most cars are driving by and there's music playing. And music is one of those things that triggers memories. They know for a fact that if you've got somebody who's got severe dementia, if you can play
Yep.
from their lifetime
Yep.
for them, they remember things.
That's right.
So music is, like I said, for whatever reason in the history of humanity, music has been built into us to
Yeah.
be something to help us remember and help us participate in our lives
That's
and
right.
enrich our lives in a way that just makes it stick to us so that we can really, really enjoy our lives. And,
Sure.
for me, I know not playing an instrument is not for everybody. Sometimes it's singing, sometimes it's just sitting and listening.
Right.
But whatever form of participation that people choose, they
Mhm.
really, really should value it.
Yeah.
It's something that I think gets bypassed a lot. You go to a movie,
Right.
and what makes the impact of the scenes often is the sounds
That,
coming to you from the speakers. It's not just the images.
yeah. That's right.
So it's a really, really valuable thing as human beings, to consciously participate in.
Absolutely.
And I wish more, and it seems like fewer people are participating in the performance aspect of it as we
Mhm.
go along. And I just wish more people would want to, would consciously
Right.
focus on, oh, that music is great. I'd like to do that.
Right. Right.
Um,
And it's never too late.
no, I mean, anybody can do it at any time.
That's right.
Um, you know, um, I say that honestly. My mother has Parkinson's, and she,
Yeah.
she sings still.
Yeah.
She played flute until she couldn't anymore. She played piano until she couldn't anymore.
I believe your mom played flute in the Horizon Band with
She
us back.
did. Yep, she played flute, and when she couldn't
Remember
play
that.
flute anymore,
Yeah.
she went back and played
Yeah.
drums.
Drums, that's right. I remember that. Yeah,
Yep.
you made me think.
And she's finally gotten to the point where she can't,
Yeah.
it's just the motor skills are not
Yeah.
there, but she listens all the time, and she still sings constantly.
Yeah. That's
And
what it's all about, you know?
it makes, and I really believe in her life that the Parkinson's thing, she's had it for a long time.
Uh,
She was diagnosed 30 years ago.
wow.
And I am convinced that the reason that she's still cognitively capable and
Right.
and partially physically capable,
Right.
as good as she is after all that time, is because
Yeah.
she uses her brain that way.
That's right. God
Um,
bless her. That's it.
She just,
Right on.
so
There you go, man. I'm going to
Good
tell
for
you, there's no better commercial than that to keep music in our lives. And whether you're listening, dancing, tapping a foot, playing, that's what it's all about. Hey, I want to thank you so much, Chris, for coming by, and we
Oh,
appreciate you.
absolutely. Thank you for
Oh,
inviting me.
before I let you go, though,
Oh, yeah.
I got to back up here.
Uh-oh.
You're in there repairing instruments now. How in the world did you get into that?
Well, it kind of started back in Los Lunas. I've always been able to, I'm a little mechanical in being the physics thing. I would take things apart, put things together, see how they worked.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that happened was I walked into the band room in Los Lunas, and I can't remember if it was Henry or Ron, handed me a flute and said, "Here, this kid's flute doesn't work, fix it." In the middle of rehearsal, and I'm like, okay.
Right.
And, and I mean, I basically understood how things went, but I did it.
Yeah.
Wow, that was pretty good. And I just, over the years, have picked things up. And I've always been that guy that's like, I wonder if there's a book about that, or I wonder if there's a video about that, or whatever. And so I own a small library of, repair manuals and things like that. And as you go through them, you start realizing, oh, there's special tools for doing this. And I wonder what that costs. And, and I literally have just kind of picked it up over the years.
Right.
And as you know, through APS, if you had a kid who had an instrument that got busted,
that's right.
It could be months before that instrument came back.
That's right.
And oftentimes, if your band was big enough, you didn't have another one to give them.
That's right. Yeah.
And the most expedient way to make sure that kid wasn't sitting there causing problems was to give them an instrument that worked. So I would bring it home and crack open the repair manuals and find out what was going on and fix it.
Yeah.
And,
there you go.
And so often it's simple things that can be fixed without any special tools and stuff. And sometimes it's not, but and so I, over the years, just collected tools and collected knowledge and collected books and did it. And then,
you're over at Bombs now.
And now I finally picked up enough information that, Dan was willing to take a shot at me and let me do some work, and seems to be happy with what I'm doing at this point. So I am.
For those that are listening and watching, Bombs Music is a music store here in Albuquerque. We hope to get them on the podium soon and do a video of this store.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. And get in there. One quick story. You have, help me out, Paul. No, it wasn't Paul. Who's the other guy in there?
Oh, Jim.
Jim, that's right. That's we used to bribe him to push our instruments to the head of the list. My wife would make him a cheesecake. So he'd get that Grant Middle School instrument ahead of maybe Taylor or some other school,
Right.
Yeah. So we do what we got to do. Hey, I'm glad so much that you're still playing, and God bless your mom. And after a long day at work, coming in and chatting with us, I do appreciate it.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Again, thank you for inviting me. So
absolutely. And we want to thank our audience for coming in, and you can get this podcast at any place online, your places you download your podcast, YouTube and Apple and all of that, go by and check it out and download it. We do appreciate it. And we always say at the end of the show, always go out there and keep playing, trying to play the right notes.
You've been listening to The Podium. If you would like to be a guest on The Podium, email the show at onthe2@gmail.com. That's ONTHEPODIUMTOO@gmail.com.